Hello and welcome to MLW Confusion. I'm your host Rob Cameron, bringing you all that you may or may not need to know about Major League Wrestling and its television programming. This week, we have a special guest dropping by the studio. It is one half of the full queer tag team champions, one half of the creeps. That is Irving West. He'll be joining us to talk about his wrestling journey up to this point. We get some nerd stuff in there too, because Lord knows I can't go 5 minutes without dropping some nerd knowledge and, talking about nerdy wrestling stuff. But more importantly, he kind of shares his journey from the LGBTQ plus perspective and talks about giving representation to those folks within the realm of professional wrestling. So might I say, it's one of my favorite conversations I've had with anybody that I've done pretty much since I've started doing interviews. So be sure to stick around and check that out. But first, of course, we got the news. All right, it is One Shot Eve at the time of this here recording. The review for that show is going to be next week because, not going to lie, just don't feel like doing a emergency record at like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night just to meet a 8 a.m. deadline Friday morning. So got this interview in the can. Gonna guess we're gonna go see the 83 Weeks girls, so that's always gonna be a perk. But more importantly, MLW announced that at Kings of Colosseum, Persephone is making a return to the company. I'm actually excited about this. She was very impressive in her MLW debut in the Women's Championship, Featherweight Championship match last month at Lucha Apocalypto, so I like to see what she could do, hopefully in a one-on-one context, to really see what she is all about. Hopefully, maybe she even gets another title shot. I know I'm salty about those things usually, and I'll probably complain when it comes around again, but let's face it, the Featherweight division is not terribly deep in MLW, and so, I guess repeated championship opportunities can be forgiven at least this one time. Anyway, so that being said, that is the big name drop for Kings of Colosseum. That, of course, is January 11th in North Richland Hills, Texas. That'll be on YouTube and all that sort of good stuff. Also announced this week is the location and date for Battle Riot, the MLW version of the Royal Rumble with a future championship opportunity on the line, is going to be April 5th in Los Angeles, California. That is crazy. Go nuts. It's going to be at the Commerce. I'm not sure if MLW has never had a show in California, let alone LA. So I'm curious to see how this will go. This will either be on paper, this is going to be amazing. Like, they're spreading out their territory and going to new interesting venues as well. But on the other hand, one of the things that helps wrestling out is by having kind of a core home base and a strict-ish territory, especially if you aren't always great about bringing whole rosters of folks around with you, though MLW has been getting slightly better about that since they've moved out of the New York Philly Triangle area. That being said, though, I'm curious to see the setup for Battle Riot. Of course, I love Battle Riot, and we'll just kind of see where that goes. As I said, really interested to see the setup off of that, and just to see how they fare in a new territory. They've been killing it with the live events, at least in terms of ticket sales, and filling up the venues that they perform in. So that being said, let's go ahead, take a pause for the cause, and when we come back, Irving West, PhD. Hey folks, MLW Confusion's become a veritable hub of shopping and treats and all that sort of good stuff. Whether you need a sugar-free alternative to energy drinks in the form of Raise Energy, or maybe even, top-of-the-line ice makers, coffee machines, and other household appliances, or, let's go crazy, and you can even get WWE licensed apparel, all through my links section. All you got to do is wander down to the descriptor of this week's episode, check out the various links, click on them, and go shopping like you normally would. Heck, it's no difference. You just came in and just said Rob sent you. And that way, you can get the things you need, maybe even at a discount, and the podcast gets a kickback as well. So be sure to check out those links. Thank you very much for listening. Back to the show. All right, we are back with MLW Confusion. As I said at the top of the show, we have a special guest sitting in. I wrote down a whole list of nicknames that he didn't tell me to do, so hopefully these are all still relevant to him. But he is Gay J Styles, the Floral Prince, the Illustrated Man. Possibly the best button chops in the business. He didn't say that one. That one's on me. But more importantly, one half of the full queer tag team champions and one half of the creeps, Irving West, PhD. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. Those are all good and relevant. I would say. I appreciate it. Thank you for the compliment on the chops. I do what I can with that. I'm but as God made me. Uh,
Yeah, I appreciate. We're gonna get off topic already. Appreciate finely sculpted facial hair. Back in the day, I used to have big old big old chops myself, and that's how people identified me in
ah,
college. So I respect a good set of mutton chops, and I've caught a handful of your matches where the mutton chops have played a role since no one could grab a handful of hair as well. So
yeah, it's the only weak point I have. If they can get a handful of the mutton chops, and that's a problem.
biggest strength and biggest weakness all at the same time.
Yeah, it's very Greek theater.
But kind of tailoring theater, the realm of professional wrestling. I asked the stock question, the most interesting, original question in the world, that no other podcast obviously does.
Mm,
What got you into professional wrestling as a fan? At least we'll start with as
yeah,
a fan.
as a fan, well, there's a certain amount of wrestling that I think you just get by osmosis, just pop culture wise, if you're at least of a certain age, right? Like it's a big enough media footprint that I knew what it was when I was younger, but I didn't necessarily actively follow it. What got me to really pay attention was I can actually say the specific match. It's the match with 123 Kid and Razor Ramon when 123 Kid gets the flash pin on Razor for the upset. That made me stop and actually actively pay attention to what was happening. Uh, there was a story there that seemed compelling to me, and so I thought wrestling was like interesting enough, but that moment kind of grabbed me. That's really what got the hook into me as far as like, okay, I got to sit down and pay attention to what's happening here. And I became a follower of wrestling, primarily WWF, since that was really all I had access to at that point. But that was the moment, that right there. I remember it super vividly. I was very young, but I remember it. Um, and it just kind of snowballed from there. I I never stopped being interested in it. Um, I feel like that's a commonality with a lot of wrestlers too. Is like a lot of us grew up watching it, and then a lot of our friends kind of outgrew it, but it just stuck with us, and that was the case with me. So yeah, WWF was all I had for the very beginning of my sort of interest in the thing. But yeah, shout out to 123 Kid and Razor Ramon. Still two of my favorites.
Oh, that blew my mind. Like I mean, I've been watching, functionally speaking, like all of my life, but like around that time was when I was kind of old enough to like it on my we'll say like it on my own without
Mhm.
without just sitting on my dad's lap primarily, and that like blew my mind because I'd watched the kid come in like the past month and well have a new name but lose in decided fashion every week for like a month, and then Razor came along, and yeah, just that was like the first time I'd really like realized like some of the I think that in my head anyway, the first time the WWF like told the story of kind of like what we would now call a jobber, an enhancement talent, like
Sure.
actually getting like a real victory over a named guy, and it was just yeah, blew my mind
Yeah, yeah.
then.
It's really good stuff. That feud is awesome. So I feel like that's something I can probably go back and watch as many times as I want, and I'll still probably pick out different bits and pieces that I think will be both like entertaining and awesome as a fan, and also instructive as far as like being a wrestler.
Of course, and I like I at a certain level, he's just starting to really get his flowers. But Sean Waltman, 123 Kid, I think has been for most of the last like 3 decades has been almost criminally underrated.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I was just about to say, like, I think lately people have been acknowledging it a bit more. Um, but he's been great for the longest. Guys like him, and at least in the United States, like him and like Taka Michinoku are like the two names that come to mind, like almost immediately when I think of people that I don't know, just perhaps didn't get as much attention or as much of the flowers as they deserve for the work that they were putting in. Um, Two of my personal favorites, so
Oh, Taka deserves so much more than what he got, at least in the United States. We'll say at least in the United States.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
obviously treated a lot better in Japan. But with with the Kaitai Dojo, and then
right.
my pride proxy is always BWO International or
Oh
BWO
yeah,
Japan because this is a Stevie Richards household.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I mean, Kai and Tai Dojo. What was the? There's like the 6-man tag. Was it the first ECW pay per view?
yeah, barely legal
Yeah,
Taka Men's Teo and now the Dick to go,
Yakushiji.
yeah, um, and then Yakushiji, Sasuke, and one more I'm forgetting as well. But yeah, I had the we'll call it like the international exhibition match.
Yeah, that really left an impression on me too. That's like another really formative match for me, and a lot of people I think I've come to find out. Probably for a lot of us, our first exposure to like a lot of both of those wrestlers and that style. Um, so mind blowing stuff to see for the first time.
And like yeah, that match just kind of flew under the radar. Like I was well into it. I mean, I was not a big ECW guy, just because I didn't have access to it. But finally getting to see like barely legal in the mid 2000s, that was like a match that like no one talked about. They was talked about like the triple threat match and Funk beating Raven,
Sure.
and then by proxy, RVD really kind of kicking up the Monday night Mr. Monday Night kind of persona
Yeah.
at that time too. And like they were talking about all this stuff, and then just like randomly in the center of barely legal, there's just this Japanese international.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That Michinoku Pro style, that really awesome like middle ground between lucha and the Japanese style, so cool. Um, that kind of stuff still mind blowing to me. So
right. I need to go dig dive Kim Justice and see if he's done like any videos. I sure he's done at least one on like Michinoku Pro or the Kaitai Dojo or something like. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, or
I
their
think I've
work,
only seen
excuse
it in
me.
passing.
But they do focusing on Japanese wrestling. Do a lot of mini docs about
Okay, yeah, no,
very
I have seen.
yeah, and it kind of goes all over the place. Whether it's the Pro Wrestling Noah Exodus, or focusing on it's kind of like the pillars of New Japan, etc., etc.,
Cool.
etc. But they're very well done, and I mean, they're not full documentary length, but they're not just a quick watch
Gotcha.
either. But and they're all free on YouTube. Uh,
That's awesome.
it took forever. It took forever for the Americans, and to a lesser extent, we still don't appreciate it. But a lot of that light heavyweight lucha
Yeah,
influenced style that finally kind of came to prominence in the mid '90s. Like I know a lot of people talk about the cruiserweights in WCW, but there
sure.
was still a whole other realm of lucha influenced guys running around there. And then Taka Michinoku was going to be the face of the light heavyweight division that just never came to pass. But
Yeah, yeah. I always wanted that to be a thing. I remember watching very with very rapt attention at that point because I wanted that light heavyweight thing to be like the deal. Like to me, that was it. Uh, but
well, Land of the Giants, I guess, is what we
yeah,
can complain about it. And I
yeah,
mean, I guess it could be worse. We could be Christian, who they gave the light heavyweight title to, and like don't get me wrong, he was small enough at the time to do it, but they were also like shaving off like 5 inches off of his height and shaving a little
yeah.
bit of his weight. Like, dude's over 6 feet tall, and they were saying he was like 5'9".
Yeah, the wrestling heights and weights are always a very funny thing to kind of just keep an eye on over the years, just to see sort of what the trends as far as presentation are. Um, and then, of course, like with men, what typically they'll flub the height and the weight on the high end, and then for anyone who is not a male wrestler, they'll either completely omit any of that data, like it doesn't exist, or they'll just go way in the other direction. Very odd. I mean, it's showbiz. I understand, but
This is why we need more gimmicked heights and weights. Standing at 167 full wallets, and
yeah, no, I'm all for that.
or weighing in at, I don't know what's a good number of carats for a full size human. Carats is probably not a good thing, but since I went with money, I figured I had to keep going that route. Yeah, oh yeah, we are are given like more of the allegedly well over 400 pounds or something like.
Yeah, yeah. No, I
That
like
one was
that.
popped me.
Yeah, to me, the sillier the better with that stuff, personally.
That's why I love like some of the video games, because they're starting to bring some of those things, at least for locations. They're bringing some of those things back. My
Oh, good.
Caw,
Cartoon now.
my Caw, who's decidedly not goth, it comes from the other side of darkness, and,
Ah,
but
okay.
it comes out at Danston, and he's all poppy and dancing around, but he's from the other side of darkness because they also dance over there too, probably.
I would assume.
But anyway, so kind of tailoring it back specifically
Mhm.
for your journey within the realm of professional wrestling. So, what made you cross the line from fan to getting into the ring?
Yeah. So this is where I think Chikara comes into play. And regardless of how Chikara ended, and a lot of the really legitimately bad feelings that kind of surround that, uh, I'd never really seen anything quite like Chikara. Like the Michinoku Pro influence was in there, of course, but seeing guys like Ultramantis Black um, was huge, like a huge deal, because like wrestling is a strange little world, but I didn't know that as a person, whether it was a place that I could find something where I fit. And seeing that there was somebody like Mantis, somebody who's like vegan straight edge and a punk, um, thriving in a wrestling role, that was such a huge deal to me. I just didn't think it was a thing. I was like, I always liked wrestling, but it seemed like it was kind of in its own separate, discrete category. And my love of punk and things like that didn't really seem to cross over or like fit, at least not in ways that I had conceived of yet. And so seeing that it was indeed a thing for there to be punks involved in wrestling and for wrestling to be really punk, in how you approach it and how you do things as a wrestler, like ethically, um, all of that was just mind boggling to me. And then, like, in a more crude sense, too, like watching Chikara, like, a lot of the guys were, they weren't big guys. And I've never been a big guy. I've always been diminutive in stature. I got to like 5'3", and that was that. In my mind as a kid, I was going to be like as big as Vader because I figured that's just what happened when you got to be an adult. You just kept getting bigger, right? Uh, that did not happen. But seeing interesting storylines, really cool wrestling, just weirdo stuff going on in Chikara. That all was huge to me. And it's what convinced me that it might actually be something I could try. Um, Before that, it had kind of crossed my mind, but again, growing up watching WWF, I didn't see myself um, as a participant in a world like that. It just didn't make sense to me. As a fan, absolutely, larger than life, super fun, a good way to have escapism, but like it didn't resonate with me in a way that seemed like something I could do. Um, Being into punk and DIY stuff, I always kind of the formal instruction of getting into punk is, hey, if you want to do something, you can just go ahead and just do it. So if you want to start a band, you just go ahead and you start a band. Wrestling is a little bit different in some respects, I think, because the safety component is super important. So I wouldn't encourage necessarily just like wrestling just cause and because you feel like it and you want to go out and do it. But if you're going about wrestling in a more of a punk way, um, I think you can fold a lot of the ideas and the ethics over into it, and it works out really well. Um, and so, just seeing a glimmer of that when I first started getting into Chikara and into some of the other indies too, yeah, real big deal. So that's really what did it. Um, yeah, yeah. And then once I got started, it's I don't know, it's the most fun that I've ever had doing anything. So I don't think I'm alone in that sentiment either. It's such a strange and cool thing. Um, and getting the chance to do it is something that I don't take for granted. And being able to be on shows with people that I've like looked up to and stuff like that, that's huge. So um, very thankful for that.
I especially with how much wrestling has grown. I think that there is very much it's very I think at a certain level it's always been apt of a kind of a punk attitude within the realm of professional wrestling, but I feel like especially now where it's widespread enough just due to media and you can have access to
Mm-hmm.
everything, and now if you have the extra cash to kind of put something together, even if it's just once just to do it, like you can do it now.
Yeah.
And wrestling, and I think wrestling is very DIY just because there's so
Oh yeah.
much. Yeah, coming into it, like unless you get into the big leagues where people are telling you explicitly like what you are doing, like who you are, like
Sure.
a lot of wrestling is just like, okay, what can I do that fits me, that's going to fit my style,
Right.
in terms of like character, your look, how you interact with fans. And I think bringing up Chikara is very interesting with that because it's such a sore spot with me. Like I love Chikara, but
Yeah.
man, like finding out everything we would later find out about it, but just because like everything you said, like there was a little bit of like everything involved with, like it was truly like, and I compare wrestling a lot to a circus as well. It was very much a
Mm.
circus because there's if you didn't really, if for some odd reason you didn't care for the lucha influence, which is crazy, why wouldn't you? But if you weren't into that, you had guys who like were fairly surprisingly fluid in like the British catch
Yeah.
style. You had occasionally had some monsters, and more than just the monster of the week in there. There was, and then you had the wacky characters. And especially in the early years, you had some bombastic personalities in there, such as Larry Sweeney, and then of course
Yeah.
Ultra Mantis
Yeah.
Black, who give me some street cred with you to put you over. I do have a copy of his EP downstairs. If it was up here,
Oh, excellent.
if it was up here, I'd show it into the camera.
That
But
EP rules. Yeah.
yeah, but
And Sweeney, Larry Sweeney is another big deal guy for me. Hugely influential for me. Discovering his work, another like light bulb moment for sure. Like him and Mantis, I think, are two guys that I was just like, okay, now hold on, maybe I can do wrestling. Maybe wrestling is a thing I can actually try to do. Um, so for better or worse, it's their fault.
oh, and I love them on commentary together in the early shows
Oh
because,
God,
like,
so good.
again, despite how it ended, uh, the wife and I are actually going through, thanks to IWTV, going through and watching the shows consecutively. So we are starting back at. I
Yeah,
guess there's like a couple shows from 2002, but really, like the footage doesn't really start being available till like 2004. But 2004 until it's closing its doors, and
there's so much good stuff in there too. Truly, like part of what you were saying too. It's always a variety show, which to me is like that's the ideal. like as much as I enjoy sort of specialized cards that cater toward a specific style, like I really enjoy the UWFI cards that were happening a lot at Paradigm, and I really enjoy like the Bloodsport, setup where it's like, okay, there's a style that's happening here, and I think that there's still variation within the constraints of that style. So it's not like it's one note, but I love shows that are just like an absolute freak show, like top to bottom, just the weirdest pairings. That's part of why that the WrestleMania weekend, the action show Dean, I think that's part of what made that show so great. Uh, is that it was just these utterly bizarre pairings that I didn't know that I necessarily even wanted, that I got through that, and it felt very much in the spirit of those parts and those days of indie wrestling. So I don't know, cards like that always get me super stoked. Uh, Anytime people book things where I'm just like, I had no idea that that was even possible to be a match, but I'm really glad that it is. Chikara, I think, did a lot of that too with their tournaments, like just bizarre pairings. Love it.
Oh, and they would just, especially for like King of Trios, they would just bring
Yeah,
people like randomly out of the mothballs that you didn't know either a that they were they were active at all, let alone as active as they were, and so
yeah,
and then they'd like, I don't know, with regards of respecting history, would still try to like throw folks together, like I'm trying to think trying to think of the verbiage of it was the Faces of Pain, I think they ended up settling for, where they had the Warlord Barbarian,
mm,
and Haku all
yeah,
together on like one team. Or then you just get like the rando like pairing, as you said, like it went, in the earlier days of the internet, it went quasi viral with Larry Sweeney having a strut off with One Man Gang, because there was like
yeah,
some dude in the front row who was dressed like a Keem, and gang grabbed the guy's hat and demanded that they have a strut off to
yeah.
Dive So Bro, and like they did it.
It's just
It was insane.
it's so fun. Yeah, I think I don't know. I never get tired of watching Sweeney. Like that's his work is it's really funny. Like I'll notice. I think everyone has this happen, but with the people that you like really look up to, and whose work you really admire, I think you accidentally start doing some of their stuff. Uh, and I'll notice it every now and again with things that I do, or like, oh, that's just Sweeney. That's what that is. And it's not even something that bums me out. I'm just like, that's actually really cool. Like that's, it was not even conscious. I'll just watch it back and be like, oh, that's just Sweeney through and through. Or I'll see something that I do. I'm like, oh, I completely took that from Regal. I didn't even realize I was doing it, but that's one of my guys. So, uh, it's going to come through. But yeah, I'm glad that I completely by chance discovered a lot of that stuff. Um, because that was a real eye opener. Especially if you've spent most of your life kind of like, it's like, okay, there was Raw and there was Nitro, and then occasionally I would see ECW. That was kind of my diet for wrestling. Uh, and then to have it just kind of blown wide open by finding indie wrestling, super cool.
Yeah, and as I said, like and it continues to expand just because there's thanks to media, and so there's
Oh yeah.
a little bit of everything. Especially, we kind of talked about some of the specialty shows, and that's why kind of like I was a fan of like what GCW is doing during WrestleMania weekend with variations of the Collective, just because they would sponsor shows that were just like
Hmm.
so weird. Whether it was Joey Janela just kind of like booking whatever he felt was fun that weekend and bringing like PCO back to the forefront. So, and
Yeah, those shows have been cool.
which started his resurgence in the world of professional
Yeah,
wrestling.
I never
Um,
thought I'd get to see Great Sasuke wrestle in person, but here we are.
yeah, and then the other offshoots, such as Bloodsport, which
Mhm.
is so different from, I mean, from anything else that's going on, just because, I mean, it harkens back to the Japanese shoot fighting, the UFWIs, etc.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then by proxy, and we'll uh, we'll either talk about it now or however we want to segue. But like looking at Effie's Big Gay Brunch as well, and
Yeah.
bringing that out. But I guess since we just kind of went ahead and name dropped it, you got to work number 8 with
Yes.
Andy as the creep. So like,
Hmm.
I'll try to break it into two parts, and then if we like
Cool.
get on to like if it becomes too big of a part, we'll break it down further, or if we forget chunks
Okay.
of it. But one, like, how did you and Andy get on the show? And then two, like,
Hmm.
what did that mean for
Oh
you
wow. Yeah.
as outside of the ring, Irving West?
Yes. Yes. So it came together in very wrestling fashion, which is to say that it was pretty unexpected. I'd been on a number of shows with Effie before, and I had talked to him, and we just prior to that brunch, were both well, Creeps and Effie were on a show called Classic City Wrestling, um, and I think I can't say for certain, but I know Effie got to see us actually wrestle that night. Um, I think he was aware of who we were before that, but so that was a good segue into me. Like, I didn't want to. I never want to be a pest or a nuisance to people. Um, and so like that night, I was just like, I'm just gonna play it cool. I won't bother Effie about like trying to do brunch. So I waited a little bit and then just kind of sent him a message like, hey, I'm sure you've got like a billion people constantly in your DMs like, hey, book me for this thing. But I just sent a message that was more or less like, if you felt like we'd be a good fit, and if it was something that made sense, then we would love to do it. And I just kind of left it there. Um, and then he got back with us and told us that we could wrestle the runway if we were available, and we jumped at the chance. We had wrestled the runway once before that too, in Pittsburgh, and had a really wonderful time because they're so good. Um, the running gag now is like every match we have with the runway is our best match. Uh, like, and that's been true all 3 times that we've wrestled them. But yeah, so that's how it came together. Like, truly, Effie just goodness, this past week people have been on his case, and it goes in cycles of people being very angry at Effie. But the thing is, um, he has put a lot of effort toward giving people a platform that honestly don't often get a platform. And I don't even mean just in terms of like brunch being a show that's queer centered. I think that even within the world of what we would call queer wrestling, so many people fall to the wayside or put in all the work, they put in all the miles, and they do all the things that you're supposed to do, that you're always told when you're coming up that you're supposed to do, and still seem to get like no traction whatsoever. It's just part of the thing. Wrestling's tough, but he's given a platform to a lot of people who I don't know otherwise would have been able to have that many eyes on them, and I would put us in that number. Um, so as far as like what it meant to me, it was a huge deal, to be out and to be wrestling. It's something that my imposter syndrome would tell me I got no business doing. Uh, but having it be such a good experience and feeling like I belonged there, and that it wasn't just like, oh, this isn't just something that someone's doing just to be nice. It's a combination of, hey, I think you guys should have more attention, and also you've been putting in tons of work. You should be here. That kind of acknowledgement was just massive. And I think that Creeps in general, like, we've gotten so much better as a result of being able to do that show. Um, and it meant a lot, like, being in Florida, seeing what it meant to fans who were there. Because Florida has been, for the past few years, such an openly hostile place for queer and trans folks. To see that, if only for like an evening or a weekend, there was a space where it's just like, no, we got each other. Um, you can be who you are here right now. We can't do much about the whole of Florida, but for that evening, it was a place where people could be themselves, and that came across really clearly. Like I'd never, I didn't think, like I knew wrestling affected people because it's affected me, right? Like it's something that's affected me deeply as a fan and as a wrestler. But like I don't know, just seeing what it meant to people, uh, really mind blowing. Seeing the relief that it brought people just for at least a little bit, um, huge. And yeah, I mean it's in the grand scheme of things, I haven't been out that long. So it felt momentous in that way too, like to to be so upfront and forward facing with the fact that I am a queer wrestler. That just meant a whole lot. Um, and so yeah, my thanks always to Effie and to the runway too. The runway make us look like $1,000,000 every single time we're in there with them. Um, so huge amount of credit goes to them too. I think they deserve like the world. And I don't know, people who I really admire and who I'm friends with in wrestling. I'm just like baffled when they aren't super mega stars. um, I feel that way about a lot of people. Some people are making their way with in due time, and I think a lot of these folks will too. But yeah, I don't know. It meant a lot. It did.
And here's me not being a good professional, and that is a lot to unpack. But I do want to put over. Well, one, I would do want to put over the runway,
Hmm.
like, especially not that Calvin Couture is not pulling his weight into it, but like Tyler Klein is amazing with some of the character work and his mannerisms,
Oh yes.
and just and like I'm surprised that like they're not a little like there's not room for everyone at the top. I understand that,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
like but I'm surprised like we do like they're not on slightly bigger shows, and
Me too.
and with that, and I know there's a lot of stuff like that goes on behind the scenes, and
Yeah.
sometimes I get upset, like, and this is just me projecting, sometimes I get upset for workers, and they're just like, and then I find out, like, in an interview like 5 years later, like, yeah, like I just didn't care that much to do, or I
Yeah,
turned stuff
yeah.
down just because I wasn't willing to do, like, I wasn't willing to leave my family, so I only wrestled
Sure.
in 3 states or something like that, and then I feel bad
Yeah.
because like I'm out there, with my pitchfork saying so and so's the best
Yeah.
wrestler ever. What are you doing?
There's a
But
million intangibles too, right? It's I liken it to this is kind of a weird analogy, but anyone who's like applied to college or grad school, you get used to the polite no. Uh, and I think wrestling is the same way, where a lot of times you kind of shoot your shot and either you don't hear back or it just doesn't really work out. And it's hard not to take it kind of hard on yourself, but then you realize the number of different factors that go into booking a single show and the number of people who are trying. Like there are more wrestlers now probably than there ever have been in the history of the world, which is awesome. But at the same time, yeah, a lot of these places are getting their doors beaten down with the emails and such. So like, I think it's very seldom the case that it's anything personal. It's almost always just a function of how everything is hectic. Um, it's not always the easiest thing to remember, but yeah, I think that also goes for when when you or I or anyone, one of our favorites, we were like, why aren't they here? It's like it could be any number of reasons, right? um, yeah. So nevertheless, I think the people that I really like a lot, like Runway, like they deserve whatever it is they want, like whatever they're trying to get. I think that they should have it because they are good enough for that.
yeah, and I agree, and I'm glad that, and actually, it's pretty much through Effie that I figured out, found out who they were. By proxy, it was through Enjoy Wrestling that I first saw them,
Yeah.
and then of course they were invited into Big Gay Brunch, but Enjoy Wrestling, yeah. it was really cool, and that was
Yes.
really, I think, really refreshing to kind of like see and bring it, like, tailor it back. We got punk rock, that they're
Hmm.
very very punk, and not just
Yes.
like punk attitude, but like they're actually giving back to the Pittsburgh punk community in addition to giving a platform to professional wrestling, and
Yeah. No,
obviously
Enjoy's
it's
awesome.
very queer friendly as well, which was
Yes.
one of the reasons
Yes.
why I threw my hard-earned money at it for a show last year. I think it was last year when that's sponsored one of their events. Um, but we're kind of seeing that, and as we talk about like representation and kind of
Hmm.
this blooming in wrestling with so much out there, but we're seeing like the enjoys with 880 wrestling and whatnot becoming very upfront with having this representation.
Yeah.
You know, how does it feel to kind of like as being someone who's out within the community, like being able to see like an enjoy come up or AA wrestling, or
Yeah.
like, well, let's be frank about it too. One half of full queer tag team champions.
Yeah. 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 No, it's amazing. Like I think to me, what's always stands out is the staggering like depth and variety that there is in queer wrestling. Um, the Effie shows were always really good for that reason too, because like even as somebody who's in that world, like there were names that I was not familiar with, uh, that I watched when I was on that show, who I became instantly huge fans of. Just mind blowing stuff that I wouldn't otherwise have seen. Um, but Enjoy has done such a great job of showcasing talent, um, and consistently. Um, 880 Wrestling, the same thing. Like, and that goes for all of the new trainees that are coming up. I've been fortunate enough to get to work with and to wrestle. Um, there's a lot of awesome variety there, um, and that's queer wrestling or otherwise. But yeah, like I think Pittsburgh has a really strong wrestling scene. First of all, um, and second of all, it's a place that I and Ripley have felt. We've felt like really at home here, and it's been really cool to become part of the community in earnest. Um, and it really does feel that way. It feels like a community. So that's another thing that I think comes across. Like when people watch the shows, I think you get that sense, you get that feeling. So yeah, yeah. I know that there are got to be tons of other places too that are doing similar things, but that's kind of the immediate area where I'm at. So
Well, and I think at a certain level they're the loudest, or at least especially in Enjoy is the loudest. I am not, I will show my hand and admit that I'm not as familiar with 880
yeah.
as I am other promotions, but Lord Lord knows my wrestling rotation is so
Okay.
packed as it
Yeah,
is.
you'll
Like
never suffer for lack of wrestling.
yeah, that's for better or for worse. But
Yeah.
I'm always, no, keeping my ears open for new places, even if I just catch them once, and for better or for worse.
Sure.
We talk about people not being able to book, be booked for cards. I can only watch so much wrestling in a day,
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah.
or I'm only
Yeah.
allowed to watch so much wrestling in a day. Stupid real job
Yeah, I know. Real
and,
life.
and people that don't want to watch wrestling with me. I guess I don't need that kind of negativity in my life, but still. And we've touched on the topic a couple of times too. Kind of, I don't know. Maybe we'll make it kind of fluff it up a little bit. But we've referenced Creeps a bunch. Like,
Mhm.
how did you and Andy get together and form Creeps?
uh, so we started training at around the same time in the same place in Georgia. Um, and so I would say the first year, at least, of our wrestling career, we wrestled each other more than almost anybody. Um, and it's really funny. At first, we were really resistant to the idea of being a tag team. And I'm not really sure why. We were just like, nah, we're not gonna be a tag team. Like it just seemed too obvious because like, oh, we're the two trainees, and we're the ones who are here all the time wrestling each other, and we could be a tag. It just seemed, I don't know, it was a little too on the nose maybe, but during the beginning of COVID, there was like a year where neither of us were wrestling, and so you got a lot of time to think. Uh, and we realized that we could probably do something pretty cool, and we just started kicking ideas around. Um, a lot of it having to do with putting who we are as people more to the fore, as opposed to doing what we thought you were supposed to do as wrestlers. Like there were certain notions of like, oh well, the wrestler does this, or a wrestler doesn't do this, um, and that time off gave us both a chance to think about whether or not any of those sorts of conventions mattered to us, and if so, in what ways. Um, so a lot of the creep stuff, like I always feel like there's the risk of sounding pretentious about it, but we think really hard about it, and we thought really hard about how we put it together. Um, and there are so many things about it that are very intentional, even though I think in practice it comes across as really chaotic and weird. Um, it's something that we've really thought about. Um, but yeah, it all kind of just came together. Like we realized that coming from similar punk backgrounds, liking a lot of the same style of wrestling, just just a lot of things that made sense, that complemented one another really well in terms of making a tag team. Uh, Not to mention the fact that like I'm sort of the graphic design, artsy component of it, and that's not to say that Rip doesn't have those traits as well, but they're much better at like nuts and bolts, like figuring out the stuff that needs to get figured out, whether that's in the context of a match or whether that's in the context of like figuring out routing for bookings and like so I think our respective skills complement each other really well. And once we made that realization, we were just like, all right, cool, let's just try doing a tag team. Um, and since then, things have gotten with wrestling just better and better. So I think we made the right choice on that one.
I mean, I'm not going to say I've seen a lot of your solo work, but I like like I like what Creeps are doing, and
Thank
I
you.
feel and you guys. It takes work to gel. Very few people just magically just totally get in together. But you guys have come together very well, and you can kind of see some of those influences, and actually like I'm putting two and two together, like I don't know, 45 minutes into this conversation of just oh yeah, Larry Sweeney, and then like watching you guys do a modified 69 comeback special, coming
Yes,
in and like,
exactly.
oh yeah, that makes sense now that we're talking. Um,
Yeah,
but also just like seeing kind of some of the smaller stuff of like, which is kind of like what drew me in. Like when I first saw you guys at Big Gay Brunch was my first experience with you, and just like
yeah.
not gonna lie, like I love any wrestler comes out in a bathrobe. Like that's my level of humor right there. Like everybody wants those $10,000 Ric Flair robes.
Exactly.
Just get a monogrammed bathrobe, and bam,
Yeah, that's
you've already have more character development than a lot of folks, for better or for worse.
yeah, yeah. And it's so funny. Like that was like honestly that was one of I think Rip's ideas was to get the bathrobes. And I hope we never retire them. I hope we literally never retire the exact two that we currently wear. Like I want them to retire it. I want it to have to actually just like crumple from my body. Um, we'll see how long we can we can keep these ones.
If nothing else, we could do like the joke like of Brody Lee and having like a closet full of stained, dirty,
Yes.
tank tops, and they're probably clean, but like he made sure he had rolled around in the dirt or something to make it look
Yeah.
like it spent at least spent the night at a truck stop or whatnot.
Yeah.
Um,
Always looked filthy. Love it.
the finest filthy insert thing here was always my best friend's like best take of any faux homeless looking wrestler. Um, but no, that's one of the things that they said like brought you to my attention, and I try to make this a platform of like I'm not a good businessman. I just bring on people that interest me and whatnot. And like the whole creep dynamic was like I thought was really neat and not something like seeing a whole lot just on the independence. Like, yeah, I could pick out like, oh yeah, this thing, like, yeah, 8 people are doing this, but like no one's doing quite like that, or no one's doing like the
Yeah,
bathrobe thing. Like, there's not too many bathrobes running around the independence. Like, I'm sure
yeah, yeah,
somebody
yeah.
could like throw out like a top 20 list at me now that I said that out loud.
Oh, I'm
But
sure.
like, but that's how the internet works.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but but yeah, like, not just to just blow smoke at you. Like, I thought it was like, I think it's an interesting dynamic, and I'm very interested in seeing like where the future holds for creeps.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Again, you've had success. I'm going to drop the full queer tag team championship again. So like, again,
Yes.
so like, how, like, what does it mean to have, like, what, one, to have the recognition of having a tag team championship, and then two, in this case, the full queer
Yeah.
championship.
So that goodness, that's another one of those things. Like, that's a real milestone. Both because like, there's a bunch of overlapping things. So like, I was born in San Francisco, so to be able to win the Harvey Milk and Sylvester championships in San Francisco as an out gay wrestler during Folsom Street Fair, that's like inconceivably awesome to me. Um, and to do it, we've done things our way, um, and it's not always the path of least resistance to do like weirdo intergender tag wrestling. Some people are real into it. Other people absolutely will not touch it with a 10-foot pole. That's their prerogative. Um, but it was huge. Like, I don't know. It was cool because I felt like I said this post match too. Like, I don't know. Like, uh, I didn't choose to be queer or to be born Native Hawaiian or to be born in the Bay Area. Like, all of those things were not things that I had a hand in choosing. But I'm actually very glad for all of those things. Um, and if having the titles, uh, just like doing the brunch show, if any of these things serve as a larger platform for what we're doing, the main reason that I care is because I hope then that whatever I'm doing can make people feel less alone. Like, that's the biggest deal to me. The fact that anyone cares or pays any attention to what we do is incredible, but having people tell me that it like means something to them, to feel like they see parts of themselves in what we're doing, or they feel seen or represented by what we're doing, that's crazy. Like, I can't even uh, to say that I'm grateful is a humongous understatement, but I think a lot of that culminates in winning the titles. And like, all we want to do with the titles, like the whole reason that we want them, yeah, we won the match, so we're the champs. That's huge. But if we're not using the titles and we're not defending the titles against other queer tag teams that we think deserve recognition, then there's really not any point. Not to me. So we've made it the goal that any queer tag teams that want to wrestle us, cool, let's make it happen. And that's not like gimmick, that's not nonsense, that's like for real. Like, if you want a shot at the titles, then talk to us and we're going to try to make that happen. Um, that's something we're real serious about. Uh, because yeah, like in the same model as what Effie has done to put eyes on people, we're nowhere near the level that he is, or have as much reach. But with what little reach we do have, everything to me revolves around lifting other people up. If I can't do that as I'm achieving things, like if I can't help other people achieve things too, then I just don't. I'm just not that interested. Uh, like, honestly, like if it's not fun and it's not fulfilling and it's not serving the people who I think of as my people, then there's no reason to do it. Like, I wouldn't be doing wrestling. Um, Lord knows it's difficult enough without having something to kind of hang your hat on is like the big reason why. Um, for some people, I'm sure it's like, yeah, I want to be on TV and make money, and that's perfectly legitimate. That's fine. Just not really at the heart of why I've ever wanted to do it. Um, but yeah, so the full queer titles, they mean a lot. Um, we're gonna try to hang on to them for dear life. But in the meantime, queer tag teams, if you want to wrestle, hit us up. Can't guarantee we can make it happen, but we can try our damnedest.
We're gonna go ahead and start kind of winding down a little bit, but I do want to, like address the future, like where do you want to see yourself going, and then by proxy, like
Hmm.
where do you want to see yourself within like the queer wrestling community, or where do you even want to see the queer wrestling community go? Sorry, that was a mouthful for
Yeah,
me.
yeah. um, so one thing that I think the brunch shows demonstrated is that there is a market for and an interest in queer wrestling. And that's not exclusive to GCW, though those shows have been huge and there was a built in kind of platform to piggyback off of. Um, I don't think that it's simply because of that. I think that those shows are a success on the strength of those shows in and of themselves and of who is on those shows. So, extrapolating from that, that same amount of attention and excitement and success is something that can carry over since Effie has understandably decided not to keep doing the brunch shows. The amount of work that it takes, I can't even begin to tell you. Uh, so I get it, but we have a model. We've seen that it works. So, like, God help me, if I ever have the means, I would love to try my hand at putting together a show for people that I think uh, need some attention on them. I don't know if or when that would ever happen, but those are the kinds of things I want to see happening more. Um, and that's like to me the vision of what queer wrestling can be, um, is something much more expansive. Uh, and a lot of shows are popping up that are focused in that direction, and that's very cool. So I think it's happening. I always want more, just more. There's so many people out there working hard, and so many people that I think deserve more. So deserve is a contentious word in wrestling because some would have you think that no amount of work or care or love or attention makes it so that you are deserving of anything in wrestling. I understand the impulse to kind of poo poo that, but when I see people working hard and doing things that I think are interesting and very cool, then I don't know what other word I could use but deserve. Um, that's just me. Um, as far as my own, everyone's got all their own goals, right? My goal since I started was I wanted to do something fulfilling, which I think I'm doing. Um, could I do it on a bigger scale? Absolutely. If given the opportunity, I would love to. But going to Japan has always been, that's like such a goal for so many people, but I am indeed one of those people too. Um, so that's the big one. That's the big goal. Um, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I will try my darndest to get there. Uh, but I would also like to wrestle basically anywhere in the world. I would love to wrestle basically everywhere in East Asia if I've been given the chance. Mainland Europe, the UK, all of these places. I'm sure it would be incredible. Um, if I get to see the world and wrestle, then I'll think of myself as the luckiest person alive. So, um, yeah, those are the things that I know. As creeps, we have our individual goals and then our goals as a tag team. Both of us from day one were like, okay, we got to get to Japan. Singles, tag, whichever, both. Like we got to get there. So we'll see. Uh, Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that answered everything. I'm not sure. I probably left something out.
I'll say close enough. We've covered a lot. It's close enough. So when we'll kind of start getting you out the door on this. So, where can we catch you in the next couple of weeks, and where can we find you on social media and/or the merch?
Yeah. So over the next few weeks, we've got a few interesting shows lined up in Tennessee and Arkansas. You might see us in Indiana soon as well. For the specifics, that's where the social media part will come in. I am Irving West, PhD, on Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. I think those are the only ones I have. I hope. Uh, so those are all the places where you'll be able to get more info on what we got coming up. My tag partner is Andy Ripley, ANDEYRIPLEY, on all of those places as well. Um, oh, and also, before I forget, just because MLW, shout out to Alex Kane. Alex Kane is one of the people who I would consider to be a friend and somebody that I really admire in wrestling. So yeah, always shout out to Alex Kane. Before I forget.
Champ, love the champ, forever
Oh yeah.
champ, whether he has the belt or not. I've
Yep.
told him that.
No, that's my champ.
But Irvin, thank you for coming on and telling chunks of your story and just doing the work that you're doing and being able to kind of anything I can do to help spread the reach of the queer community. Like I'm not gonna lie, like I don't do enough in terms of representation with even within my own podcast, but it's great to have someone on who's willing to share everything.
Yeah, thank you. Of course. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
MLW Confusion is a weekly podcast that's written and performed by Rob Kammer and hosted by Spotify for podcasters. MLW Confusion is part of the Urban Wrestling Network, and you can check them out and check out the Major League Pod on YouTube at Urban Wrestling NW. The background music for this section is Ruined by Day, performed by Alan Schroeder. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to support, please like, subscribe, and tell your friends, family, and enemies. Leaving a review is also helpful. Word of mouth of advertisement is very important for small podcasts such as this. Social media links can be found in the description, but Twitter and Instagram are at the Nova of Cass, TheNovaofCass, and Facebook is at MLW Confusion, all one word. If you'd like to support monetarily and help upgrade my equipment, please check out my virtual chip jar at ko-fi.com/Casanova. Or if you prefer more bang for your buck, you can go to patreon.com/Casanova, CASSONOVA, where for as little as $2, backers get access to the podcast early and without those pesky ads, plus other exclusive content. So join the crew that is headed up by Keith Wynn, Alan Schroeder, Alex McCarthy, and Elenia, and check it out. You can also find t-shirts, coffee mugs, and other merch at the Confusion Podcast on Teespring. Also, be sure to check out the description to find some affiliate links for, WWE merch, coffee machines, ice makers, and much more. For business inquiries such as ads and sponsorships, please email rzkammer, that's Kamerer, at comcast.net. Thank you for listening.